George Foulkes, to be followed by Christina McKelvey.
Deputy Presiding Officer, I am also pleased to contribute to this, what I consider to be a very important debate, and with no disrespect to the important matter we were considering this morning, this is actually going to have much more direct effect on all our constituents than that will. And can I say to the Cabinet Secretary that although she introduced it by saying it had widespread support, and that does apply rightly so to the general principles, I think as the debate has gone on, we have seen more and more reservations about some aspects of the bill, and I share some of those reservations. In relation to the presumption against closure, albeit implicit in the bill, I think it is crucial, but I think it is also crucial that it applies not just, as others have said, to rural schools, but also to urban schools. And whereas rural schools have problems about remoteness, some urban schools in particular have problems of deprivation, and that really needs to be taken account of. I do not think enough consideration is given to the problems of children from poor backgrounds when they go to school, and the importance of teaching, of good teaching and small class sizes in relation to those pupils. I also think it is unclear, and a number of others have said this, and it needs to be clarified, on the basis on which ministers would call in proposals, how they would make decisions, the criteria on which they would make decisions to overrule a council's proposal. I do not think that is clear yet, not just, I hope, on the mechanism of consultation, but on the substance of consultation. I hope it would be as well. And now, as Bob Doris used Glasgow, can I illustrate my concerns with the current proposals to close 4 primary schools in Edinburgh? All of them, sadly, in less advantaged areas. I hope the Cabinet Secretary will note that. In Birdie House School, Fort, Royston and Drumbray. Sorry Margaret Smith has gone, because I wanted to hear a bit more from her about what she thinks about a Liberal SNP council proposing the closure of Drumbray Primary School. I must say I have grave reservations about it, very grave reservations, as do local pupils and teachers. Now, recently I attended a briefing with Councillor Marilyn McLaren, convener of education, the SNP Liberal Democrat controlled council, and we pointed out to her that the SNP, and I think the Liberals also supported this, had a manifesto promise to reduce class sizes, and the Cabinet Secretary referred to this, agreed with this earlier, to 18 for primary 1 to 3. Now the statistics, the most recent statistics from Edinburgh show that there are only 480 pupils in primary 1 in classes with 18 or fewer pupils, and there are 2,804 in primary 1 in the 19 to 25 category, and 398 in classes of more than 25. And Edinburgh is way behind some other authorities, like Midlothian and East Ayrshire, just to take 2 random examples, in relation to the achieving the targets for reducing class sizes in primary schools. Now, what is necessary? What are the necessary factors to be able to reduce class sizes? There are 2 key factors. One is that you have more classrooms. That's inevitable. If you've got the same number of pupils, or you reduce class sizes, you need more rooms to be able to educate them in. You also need more teachers. And that's why the Edinburgh proposals are particularly worrying, because the closure, if they go ahead of these 4 schools, including Drumbray, and I'm glad to see Margaret Smith here now, will mean more pressure on the receiving schools round about. And if you look at those schools and look at what's already been said by the parents, that means that classrooms which have been used and transformed into music rooms, PE rooms, general purpose rooms, will have to be brought into use as classrooms. And that diminishes the educational experience for the pupils, not just the pupils coming in from the closed schools, but the pupils already in the receiving schools. Also, no consideration at all seems to have been given to taking account of the impact of curriculum for excellence. And I hope that the Cabinet Secretary will deal with this in her reply and explain how this is going to be taken account of. I also find it strange that in the case of Edinburgh, they've changed their arguments because of the way the legislation appears to be changing. Originally, they said smaller class sizes are a priority and can be achieved despite school closures. I don't know how, but they said that. Now they're saying larger class sizes are more beneficial for children, as they will receive team teaching and will be entitled to more money per capita. I think they have to be very careful, and we have to look very carefully at the double dealing that and the double talk that seems to be coming out within the Edinburgh consultation. And we've heard talk about best value and business cases. I must say, I am very sceptical about business cases in relation to schools. These kids are individual human beings who need to be nurtured, and to talk about a business case for a school and a school closure really seems to me to be very strange indeed. And also, as the EIS said to me, and Marilyn McLaren said she had the support of the EIS for her putting these proposals forward. That's not what they said to me. And one of the interesting things, which I think is a very powerful argument that they put to me, is that when you denounce closures, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And Margaret Smith will know this in Drumbray, that already parents say, well, if this school is going to close, I'm not going to put my kids in there. I'm going to get into the schools roundabout straight away. And that is the insidiousness of these kind of proposed closures that needs to be taken account of. The other point I wanted to make is in relation to teachers. I mean, isn't it appalling, isn't it criminal that we're closing schools, making class sizes larger, when we've got so many teachers unemployed? Already secondary and primary school teachers trained, we've got over 550 unemployed, but then we've got the probationary teachers just out, done their probationary year, excited, looking forward to teaching, and no jobs for them. When we spoke to Marilyn McLaren, of the nearly 100 probationary teachers in Edinburgh, only 10 have been offered teaching jobs. When they're desperate to teach and there are kids desperate to learn. This is an appalling situation that we have in the SNP-controlled Scotland at the moment. This is exactly what is happening in our schools. So can I conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask, what will the Council, in Edinburgh's case and indeed in other cases, what do they do if the parents and the teachers are against the closures? Bob Doris, I thought, made a very good point that the councillors he came up against seemed to have be entrenched and defensive. That's what I found with Marilyn McLaren. I think they've made up their mind. All 4 are going to close. And if I ask the question, what are they going to do if there is strong opposition and arguable and powerful arguments from the parents and from the teachers against closure? I hope that we can get a commitment that they will abandon their proposals to close them. But what will the government do? What will the minister do if the council ignores those parents and those teachers? I hope that will be a basis for calling in the proposals. And finally, can I say, Deputy Presiding Officer, my good friend and colleague, the convener of the committee, rightly said that closure should only take place on educational ground, if it has a positive educational argument. What is being pushed through in Edinburgh is not on any basis of improving education. It's on saving money, and it's the inevitable consequence of the Concordat and the council tax freeze. And I can understand why there is widespread disquiet about Edinburgh proposals. And I hope Margaret Smith and all the other MSPs representing Edinburgh and the Lothians will strongly support me. Yes?
I hear what George Foulkes. I'm not here to speak on behalf of Edinburgh City Council. We're in a consultation period and I've asked a whole series of questions that I still haven't got answers to. But I think each of us have got to be able to look at it, and in the same way that you're calling on the Council to listen, I think it's also each and every one of us has to look at the facts that are presented. And if an educational case can be made for a closure of a school, we have to be big enough, and that includes you, George, to occasionally say that sometimes maybe the case has actually been made for a closure. Now, I'm not saying it has or it hasn't, but it works both ways. Accuse
me of not being big enough one way or another, as you know, Margaret. But I would, and if there is a strong educational argument, if I can see it, if the teachers accept it, if the parents accept it, then I would go along with it. And we had a meeting of over an hour, and Malcolm Chisholm was there, Margot MacDonald and I were there, and we listened very carefully to the proposals. And if that is the case, then we would support it. But equally, I hope that if there is a very strong opposition to the proposals, they will be abandoned by Margaret Smith's colleagues and by Fiona Hislop's colleagues in control at Edinburgh City Council.
Christina McKelvey, followed by Anne McLaughlin.